going on, guys? So here in this video I would like to take a few minutes to kind of recap and review my recent trip over to the Canary Islands, more specifically the island of Lanzarote. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. So the first part of this video I want to talk about my general trip over there, not fishing related at all, and then the second part we'll talk about the fishing specific parts of my experience there. So first up, every time I travel to Europe, I can't believe just how close it is. So for most of human history, it was really difficult, and it was a giant journey to get from the US or at least North America to Europe and vice versa. Now it's just so easy. So on Friday I went to work. Friday night I got to the airport, got on the plane, took a quick nap, and when I woke up, I was already over in Madrid. So I just can't believe how simple and how really quick it is. It's an 8-hour flight. It just flies by, especially because it's overnight, at least they usually are. A lot of flights going from the east coast of North America over to Europe are overnight. It's just so simple to get there. So after I got to Madrid, I had a quick layover, and there was a 3-hour flight heading south over to Lanzarote. If you're not familiar with the Canary Islands, they're a volcanic island chain off the northwest coast of Africa. So the nearest kind of mainland country to them is Morocco. And I think Spain's had them, and it's been part of Spain since the 1400s or something like that. So it's a really long time. It's kind of like a Spanish territory. At least I think. I'm not super familiar on the political aspects of how the Canary Islands are Spanish and whatnot. But anyway, so 8 hours to Madrid, 3 hours to Lanzarote. Super simple flight. Prices weren't too bad. I think it was like $700 to get there, which I think is pretty good considering what it costs just to travel around the US, let alone go across the entire ocean. And then once I got there, prices were also very cheap. The Canary Islands are pretty cheap to begin with. I was over there in 2018 and it was really cheap. And especially now, the US dollar is pretty strong compared to the euro. So it was even cheaper, at least coming over from the US. My Airbnb was like $45 a night and I had a full apartment. Food over there was pretty cheap, not super cheap, but I'd say slightly cheaper than it is here in the US. Like nice dinners at restaurants were under $20 when here they would be, let's say, between 30 and 40, something like that. So still fairly cheap, at least compared to what you would expect to pay here in the US. It was an absolutely beautiful island. In 2018 I was on Gran Canaria, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is one of the main islands people live and work on. Lanzarote is more of like a tourist island, so even though it's Spanish, basically everywhere I went, at least someone spoke English, just because they're used to catering to a lot of tourists over from mainly England, but also other parts of Europe. There were a whole bunch of English or British people there on vacation, just lots of tourists. So the main reason I picked the islands was, one, because cheap and easy to get there, but secondly, now let's get into the fishing part. It did seem like there was a pretty good amount of different species over there that I can catch fairly easily that would be new additions to my life list that I've never caught before. So I did a fair bit of research beforehand. I kind of, I found some YouTube videos from other YouTubers that have been there, and I found a really good blog of another multi-species person that travels a lot. The name of the blog, I believe, is There's Something Fishy Going On, if I'm not mistaken. Link down in the description. And one of the YouTubers was An Angling Adventure Before Dementia, maybe. Also, link in the description. Both of those have some good videos and good blog posts, not only for the Canary Islands, but also for a lot of parts in Europe. But anyway, so yeah, seemed to be a pretty good multi-species spot. Got some spots from them, but then once I got there, I realized it was going to be kind of difficult to fish. It's not very accessible or, I guess, mobility friendly, being volcanic islands. There's a lot of rocks, a lot of cliffs. Very hard to get to a lot of these fishing spots, especially if you're not very mobile. Thankfully, I'm fortunate enough where I'm pretty active, I'm pretty in shape, easy to get to a lot of these places for me. Some of them were obviously harder than others. I mean, you could see from the videos I was fishing off of some cliffs at some point. But not a spot I would recommend for, let's say, little children or people that don't have great mobility. So that made it a little bit difficult at times. And then once I started fishing, I thought I would get a really good variety really easily. And that just was not the case. It's a pretty good amount of diversity over there. but it just seemed like they were more of a certain species than others, and that's going to be the ornate wrasse. But let's get into that in a second. Right now, I just would like to list the species that I caught in order that I caught them in, and we'll talk a little bit about them. So first up is going to be the common two-banded sea bream. It's a species of fish kind of in the porgy family, or what they call bream over there. Closest related to the fish that we catch here, which are like spot-tail pinfish or silver porgies. Ended up catching 3 of these. Pretty cool looking fish, got a couple bands on it and whatnot. Nothing really too special about it. Then after that, we got one of these ornate wrasses, which I knew we were going to get a lot of, just because I've seen these blog posts and these other YouTube videos of people catching a lot of them, but I did not know how many we were going to catch until we got there, and I could not believe it. So the first one was cool. I think that first trip I ended up catching like 9 more or something like that, so I think it was like 10 within the first couple hours, and I ended up catching 88 of them for my entire trip, which was a ton. I just could not stay away from them. They were just so many of them. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fish, but there were just so many of them. After that, we got a couple black gobies, which was kind of like a cool bycatch. They just kind of came out in open water, which was a real surprise, but pretty cool. Gobies are one of my favorite, I guess, families of fish, because there's so many of them and they look really, really cool. So we got, I think, 4 black gobies that looked really nice. After that, I fished the tide pools, and this was the kind of another disappointing part. There was not really much diversity in the tide pools. So sometimes when you're microfishing, there's a ton of different species in like a small area, but not in the Canary Islands. It was mostly all these Madeira, I think it's Madeira. Still don't know how to pronounce that word, but Madeira gobies. Got a bunch of those, and that was kind of disappointing just because I thought microfishing the tide pools would have produced a better variety of species rather than just this single species of goby. At this point, I am not sure what I caught, so I just got to check my notes real quick. Okay, so the next day we got canary damselfish. Really cool looking damselfish species. Kind of a dull brownish blackish color, but they do have these like really nice electric blue accents on the fins and around the pectoral fin on the body. Really, really nice. Ended up catching a good amount of these. They were also pretty common. I think I got like 10 of them for my trip or something like that. Really, really nice fish. And we got 1 blacktail comber, which was a cool fish, just another little addition to the life list. Only got 1 of these guys. Also looks okay, nothing much else I could say about it. Nothing too fancy or too special. After that, we got a Molly Miller blenny, which was pretty disappointing. Only because I caught 1 of these in the US a couple weeks earlier. Maybe like 6 weeks earlier. So I fly all the way across the Atlantic, and we get a species that I can catch here in Florida. So a little disappointing, but another new species from my trip there, just not a new one for the life list. After that, we got a hairy blanny, and this is an interesting one. This is kind of my opinion, but I believe the hairy blannies the hairy blanny I caught there and the hairy blannies that are there are not the same species of hairy blanny that are found here in the US. According to all the research I've been able to do, they are, but they look really, really different. So I believe if some scientists did some DNA testing, or they did a more detailed study on the hairy blannies that are in the Canaries and the hairy blannies that are here in the US, I believe they're going to be 2 different species, but that's just kind of like an opinion and a hunch. I don't really know. So for now, we're going to go with the most accurate science and call those hairy blannies, which would be a new addition to the life list. But I don't know, I'm still kind of iffy about that one. Then we got a Madeira rockfish. I ended up getting a pretty good amount of these over the couple days. Really cool looking fish. It's my 3rd ever rockfish species or scorpionfish species. Look really nice, really, really bright red. You could see them pretty well in the water. I thought they were cardinal fish at first. Ended up being rockfish, but still a pretty cool looking fish. Then the next day, what do we get here? Couch's bream. Not named after a couch, but named after someone whose last name is a couch. A little fun fact there. Looks just to be like a porgy. Kind of boring, but hey, another new species. Then we got a white sea bream. This thing surprised me. Only got 1 of these as well. I just kind of dropped straight down between some rocks, and this thing came out, hit it hard, and pulled hard. I was actually really surprised we got it out through these rocks, but it ended up being the biggest fish I caught of the trip. Put up a really nice fight, and it was a cool catch. So a nice little white sea bream there. After that, ooh, Mediterranean cardinal fish. This one was also really cool. This was a species I wanted to catch, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to. It was kind of one of my like most wanted fish going into the trip. Again, dropping down in between the rocks. It's a nocturnal fish, likes dark water. So in between the rocks, had some dark water, and this guy had a little bit of fish bites. So when I pulled him out, I thought it was just going to be another Madeira rockfish, but it wasn't. And this was one of my favorite catches of the trip. Then we got a puffer, a Guinean puffer, maybe that's how you pronounce it. Not sure. Related to like the northern puffers and the southern puffers that we have here in the U.S. It looks really, really similar. I like puffers just because like the novelty of catching a puffer. After you get a couple of them, it does get a little boring, but one is okay. And these are supposed to be pretty common, but I had a hard time catching them. They just kind of like to bite around the hook and don't actually bite the hook. So you lose a lot of bait when you're fishing for these guys. But we got one, so I'm happy with that. And that was followed by, I think this actually might be my favorite fish of the trip. Either the Mediterranean cardinal fish or this one are my top two catches. Macronesian sharp-nosed puffer, I think that's how you pronounce it. Really, really cool looking fish related to the Caribbean sharp-nosed puffers that we have here in Florida. I ended up catching one of those on my trip. Really, really good looking fish. I think this might be my favorite. I don't know. Those are my top two. And after that, we got two more. A rock pool blanny, which also was supposed to be pretty common in the rock pools and tide pools, along with the Madeira goby. But I've only found like one or two tide pools that had these blannies in it. Most of the tide pools either had nothing or just the gobies. Ooh, excuse me. So I think I only got 4 of those, but pretty good. I like blannies, they're pretty cool. Any kind of like small bottom fish I think are really, really cool. So a couple of rock pool blannies to the list was cool. And then I did one night fishing session. I was kind of bummed with myself because I forgot my headlamp. So I can't really do a lot of night fishing. But I did night fish one time, didn't make any videos out of it. So this is the first look here at the auxiliary bream. So there's no videos on it on my channel, but we got one of those for the life list as well. So not a whole bunch of new species. I believe it was only 15 new species, 16 different species total. I went into the trip trying to get 20 different species, which looking back on it might have been a little bit too much, but maybe not. I guess I just kind of compared it to fishing, let's say in South Florida or in Singapore, or maybe even like Hawaii, which I probably shouldn't have done because those 3 spots I just mentioned, the diversity there is massive. Like in Singapore, I got 60 species in 12 days or something like that, and I could have got a whole lot more. The Canary Islands are not going to do that, and I should have probably taken that into account before I went on the trip, but I think I just kind of overestimated how many different species there are in the Canaries and how easy it would be to catch them, and that just wasn't the case. Overall, though, I think it was a very good trip. I had a whole lot of fun. Did get a couple new species for the life list, but if you're looking for a spot to catch as many different species as you can, I think there's a lot better ones. The Canary Islands are beautiful and pretty good fishing opportunities, and there are a good number of different species there. It's not as good as, let's say, a trip to South Florida or a trip to Hawaii or a trip to Singapore. Thailand's probably up there, I'm not sure, but it was an okay fishing trip, just not a great fishing trip. But yeah, definitely recommend it. If you have any questions, let me know. Check out the blog post and the other person's YouTube channel. There's something fishy going on and an angling adventure before dementia. Both those guys helped me out a lot. So their links are in the description. Take a look at those. Hope you liked it, and I will see you next time.